Jazz drum beats. We've all checked out the great jazz drummers like Tony Williams, Philly Joe Jones, Art Blakey, Jack DeJohnette, and yes, Buddy Rich, and wanted to do what they do. That effortless independence, like their hands are just floating. But when we sit down to try to do it, it's hard. And a big part of it is the global conspiracy to keep all the good information about jazz swing off of YouTube. That's why it's good that I'm out here, weathering the storm, refusing the payoffs from big jazz drums, so that I alone can bring you the truth. Okay, not really. Obviously, there are tons of great jazz teachers, several of whom I've interviewed on the podcast, and some people making great content for jazz drums on YouTube. But I've got my own little angle on things. And I just finished coaching 4 one-on-one students on a little journey to go from various stages of jazz curious to way better at jazz. And I'm not even bragging when I say that, because it's mostly due to their efforts. But I picked up a few things along the way that I think may add something to the conversation. But I can't put that in a YouTube title. But I do think this will be a new angle you maybe haven't heard before when it comes to jazz swing beats. And if you're struggling to play them, stick with me, and maybe this will help. Because playing jazz swing beats, if you're not familiar with them, can be like balancing on a balance beam. Except you've turned that balance beam on its end, and you're trying to balance on that. There are 360 degrees of ways in which you could fall off. You could just be stuck in a rut with boring ideas. When you try to play something interesting, the swung eighth suffers. Or your coordination. So you feel like you're floating and not grounded. Then you address those things and you're back to playing the same old boring beats. Well, today I'm here to help. I'm Nate, and people call me the 80/20 drummer. And on this channel we go a little deeper and ask the slightly nerdier questions. And as I said, I think this will be a jazz lesson with some things you maybe haven't considered. Today on 80/20, jazz swing hacks nobody else is talking about. Stay tuned. And folks, today's video is brought to you by me, the 80/20 drummer, and if you're watching this on YouTube, you're gonna get 8 to 10 minutes of my best jazz instruction. But people on my list are gonna get a list exclusive version that's nearly twice as long, with specific exercises and metronome methods. And if you'd like that extended length edition, complete with the transcription, you can get that for free by clicking the link below the player and telling us where to send it on the next page. Now, on to the lesson. Everybody's probably seen this version of a jazz beat, but if you haven't, let's start here. I play my kick drum on all 4 beats of the bar, then I add the hi-hat on 2 and 4. Then I add ride cymbal and quarters. If you haven't practiced this yet, it's really good to practice, and the key thing is to focus first on timing and then on kit voicing. So first, I'll turn on a metronome on quarters and just try to lock up. It might take a couple of days to get comfortable, but eventually it'll get easier. Then, the next lesson is relative volume. I want to bring the dynamic of the kick drum way down, so it's kind of felt, not heard. I want to make the hats a nice definitive chick, and the only thing I look for in my students is that they're only lifting their foot at the last minute, rather than holding it suspended in anticipation. Finally, when this is feeling good, we add the skip note on the ride cymbal. That's the spangolone. This is all necessary just to get to the starting line, but it's not very original yet. In fact, here's the excellent Jonathan Blake, who I used to watch at the Jazz Gallery in New York, demonstrating it. So what's the balancing act? It just means that every time we add something new, other things can suffer. I discovered this coaching my jazz students. Say you're playing the quarters on the ride adequately and you want to add skip notes. Now you're in relation to the swung eighth, not just the quarter, so you need to pay attention to the subdivision. But when you do that, it's easy for the coordination to suffer. Say you want to add some comping with the non-lead hand. Now quite often the touch and subdivision will go out the window. This gets worse when we start varying the ride cymbal or playing semi-broken time, as one of my students coined. It's a juggling act, and every new ball we add destabilizes things. So how do we fix it? Very slowly, by making little baby steps. We add one new thing, then allow ourselves to be sloppy for a while we're integrating it. Then, when it's comfortable, we turn our focus back to the basics like time, touch, and subdivision, while incorporating that new thing. With that in mind, let's talk about where we're trying to get. Here's Connie K playing what I call semi-broken time. Hear how he's got a meandering swing beat that's not just spangling, but he's phrasing around the beat? And hear how his hi-hat is emphasizing the ends of phrases? But that everything's swinging, and the subdivision and touch are always present? This is kind of table stakes for modern jazz. If you want to play with any kind of group in 2024, this kind of time will be your Swiss Army knife, allowing you to play more conservatively and tip, as they say, in certain contexts, but phrase more openly in other situations. The problem is, it's hard enough getting to playing spangaling while you're phrasing with the snare and bass drum. But there aren't many templates for how to break up the time without doing a full Roy Haynes or Jack DeJohnette. Anyway, this will be our starting point. If you're comfortable playing that little swing beat and nothing else, i.e. the carpet groove I just demonstrated, I'd recommend practicing stuff like John Riley's book or Jim Chapin. But we're going to go in a different direction, and you can do this in parallel. The first challenge is hearing the ride cymbal in different places, so we'll make that phase 1. Here I am playing a swing beat in 4, feathering the kick but varying the ride cymbal. Why? It's actually most obvious if you say it out loud. If I'm just going ba-ba-ba-da-ba-ba-da in perpetuity, that's a loop and that's okay. But if I'm playing along with other instruments and it's appropriate, why not vary it a little? Ba-ba-ba-da, 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 ba-ba-da, ba-ba-da, ba-ba-ba-ba-da, ba-ba-ba-da, ba-ba-da-ba-da, ba-ba-ba-da. Make a little phrase just as a horn player or a piano player would do. That's all we're doing in this example. I'm taking all that practice I've done on just playing the spangling with the feathered kick drum and bringing it into this exercise. But I'm changing the phrasing with the cymbal and hi-hat. In a minute we'll teach you to improvise this, but don't worry about that for now. Just copy what I do, which, as I mentioned, will be transcribed for you below the player. That's beat 1, which you can just copy for now. Now we'll do another version, beat 2. Now, let's pause. Remember when I said this was a balancing act? Most of the time when I ask people to do this, the subdivision suffers. So we pull out the trusty metronome and we put it on every triplet, with the accent on the last triplet of the bar. If you're feeling saucy, put it on only the third triplets, or swung eighths. The goal of these early exercises is to get you to feel what it's like to make more interesting phrases with the ride and hats. But since it's a repeating pattern, you can still focus on the details once you've learned the phrase. Now you're probably wondering, when do we incorporate the kick? Because listen to Max, and listen to Mel Lewis. The answer to that is now. In Riley's book, after you've learned to comp with the non-lead hand, you turn to the bass drum. And these methods parallel that, but on a slightly different track. Just as we did with the ride cymbal and hats, we're going to learn some semi-broken phrases. And to keep it simple, we're going to keep the ride cymbal on quarters, for now. If you're familiar with my teaching, you might recognize these as jazz beats. Here's number 1. I'll practice this first to get the feeling. I'm thinking about a nice light ride cymbal beat, a good solid chick on the hats where I'm not anticipating the chick too much, and a good open sound in the center of the snare drum. Here's number 2. Now, just as with the phase 1 stuff, it's time to stop and pull out the metronome. Because these are in relation to a swung eighth, there's a need to define those swung eighths consistently. First, as before, I'll put the metronome on every triplet with the accent on the last triplet of the bar. Next, I'll put the metronome on swung eighth offbeats. I'm looking for every eighth to be the same distance from every other eighth. The purpose of this is to get you feeling the feeling of semi-broken time, incorporating the bass drum, but still in a simple enough format that you have bandwidth to pay attention to time, balance, subdivision, and touch. But what about adding skip notes in on the ride cymbal? Because when Max or Joe Morello play a beat like this, they're mostly adding swung eighths on the ride cymbal too. So let's incorporate that next. In the following exercise, we're going to get as close as possible to simulating what you might play in a real jazz situation without fully improvising yet. Here's beat 1, except now I've incorporated a logical ride pattern, which will be transcribed for you below and which you can practice. Now here's beat 2. When you're first learning these, just think about the coordination and balance. It's okay if it's a little sloppy at first. As John Riley always said, worry about the coordination and timing first, and that may take a couple days. When that's finally feeling better, then think about the touch. Try to play the ride cymbal in a relaxed way, so your stick feels like it's bouncing freely. For a lesson that goes deeper into that, click the card on your screen. And think about your hi-hat chick. Don't anticipate. Instead, wait for the last minute before the chick to pick up your foot. And try to get big, assertive open sounds from your bass drum and snare. When all that feels good, it's time once again to think about subdivision. As you get better, you'll want to start going directly to having the metronome on swung eighth offbeats. But if that's still challenging, I'd put it on every triplet first. Now your task is to hold all that other stuff constant, while improving the consistency of the subdivision. See how involved this is? You've just gone from not sure what to do in a jazz beat to playing stuff that a real pro would play, while maintaining subdivision touch, relaxation, and coordination. And that's a very good book 1 of this lesson. But you know what we haven't done yet? Say it with me. Improvised. Because in real life, Connie Kay, Max, Joe Morello, Mel Lewis, and Roy Haynes didn't just play the same jazz beats over and over. They improvised, moving the phrasing in real time. So that's what we'll get into in book 2 of this lesson, when we get really cutting edge, and cover a brand new method my jazz students helped me innovate. And if you're watching this on YouTube, this is the point where the video ends. But don't worry, if you want to continue on to the second half, the members exclusive portion, all you need to do is click the link below this player and enter your email address in on the next page. And you'll be directed immediately to the full video so you can continue uninterrupted. Even if you're good with the material for now but just want the transcription, you can get that for free in the same place by clicking the link below the player. Anyway, hope you guys have enjoyed this lesson. If you did, please leave a comment below, and I'll see you again in another lesson of the week.